The call came while I was changing my brother's bandages. Calvin winced as I peeled the gauze from the angry red line running across his chest, the fluorescent lights in the rehab clinic turning his face a sickly shade of gray. The nurse had warned me that recovery after surgery would test both of us, but I hadn't realized how deeply it would test my patients, too. I'd been working remotely for months, accounting spreadsheets on my laptop by day, sponge baths, and pain meds by night. The rhythm of care had become my new normal in this quiet town in Northern Virginia. Then the phone rang. At first, I almost ignored it. Reception in the clinic was terrible, and most calls dropped before I could even say hello. But something, a kind of maternal instinct, made me grab it anyway. Mom. It was my daughter, Erin. Her voice came through broken and muffled, as if the air itself resisted carrying her words. Erin, honey, I can't hear you. Where are you? Mom, he changed the locks. What? The locks, Mom. I've been outside for hours. He said we don't live here anymore. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. But then her words hit me. Cold, heavy, irreversible. Erin, are you safe right now? I'm at the gas station. The old one off Route 9. Mr. Landry let me use his phone. My car's dead. I walked 3 miles in the rain. Her voice cracked. He just stood there, Mom. Him and his parents. They watched from the window while I begged them to open the door. I pressed a trembling hand to my forehead, forcing myself to stay calm. 30 years of balancing budgets and crisis meetings had taught me how to hold my voice steady when everything else inside me was falling apart. Listen to me carefully, I said. You need to get to the Maplewood Inn on the east side of town. Ask for Nancy at the front desk. Tell her you're Melissa Green's daughter. She'll know what to do. The emergency room? That's what we used to call it, I said quietly. There's cash in the top drawer and a spare set of keys. Just get warm, get safe, and call me from the landline. When I hung up, Calvin was watching me from the bed. His eyes, still sharp despite the painkillers, met mine. Trouble? He asked simply. Worse than that, I said. Erin's husband locked her out of the house. He let out a low whistle, the kind that said more than words. You always said that boy was slick. I nodded, already calculating, the way my late husband once did whenever a storm was on its way. Maybe slick, I murmured, but not smart enough to realize who he's dealing with. That night, after Calvin drifted into uneasy sleep, I found a quiet corner of the hallway and called a number I hadn't dialed in nearly 6 years. Law Office of Campbell and Hayes, a young voice answered. Tell Mr. Hayes it's Melissa Green, I said. He'll know what it means. There was a pause, then a click. Melissa, came the older man's voice, steady, surprised, and immediately alert. It's time to open David's envelope, I said. Another silence. The sealed instructions? Yes, I said. My son-in-law just declared war on the wrong family. By the time I left Calvin's clinic the next morning, the rain had softened to a cold drizzle that made the whole town smell like wet leaves and diesel fuel. The sky was the color of tin, the kind of morning that makes every breath feel heavier than it should. I drove the old Ford through back roads slick with mud, the wipers groaning like they resented the effort. My mind was already miles ahead, at the Maplewood Inn, where Erin was waiting, and beyond that to what would come next. David's plan. The sealed envelope I'd kept locked in the bottom drawer of my desk since the day we buried him. I'd promised never to open it unless our home, the green property on Cedar Hollow Road, was in danger. And now it was. When I reached the motel, Erin was sitting in the lobby wrapped in one of those scratchy brown blankets they give out during snowstorms. Her hair was damp, and her coffee had gone cold. She stood as soon as she saw me, a mix of relief and shame flickering across her face. Mom, she said, voice small. I'm here, sweetheart. I hugged her hard enough to make her gasp. For the first time since yesterday's call, I felt my own breath steady. Did he call you? I asked. Twice. I didn't answer. Good. Don't. I sat across from her, lowering my voice. Your father left instructions for a situation exactly like this. She blinked. Dad, what kind of instructions? The kind that makes sure people like Aaron get what's coming. Aaron, her husband, smooth talker, ex-real estate agent turned online entrepreneur, always chasing one scheme after another. He'd convinced everyone he was clever, but clever men often forgot how patient women could be. I opened my leather handbag and took out a small metal key, its tag worn smooth from years of handling. This is for the deposit box your father kept at First County Bank, I said. He called it our emergency ledger. I think it's time to see what's inside. Aaron frowned. I didn't even know he had one. He didn't want anyone to know. Said it was safer that way. We checked out of the motel after I paid Nancy, the front desk clerk, who slid me a look equal parts sympathy and curiosity. Small towns thrive on curiosity. I could already imagine tomorrow's gossip at the diner. The bank stood on the corner of Main and Laurel, an old brick building with a clock that had been frozen at 2:47 since before Aaron was born. The manager, a soft-spoken man named Mr. Coleman, still remembered David. His expression changed the moment I showed him the key. Yes, Mrs. Green. Of course. He led us into a back room that smelled faintly of paper and cold air. He turned the key, then stepped away. Take as long as you need. The box wasn't large, just a dull gray rectangle with our family number stamped in brass, but inside lay a folder wrapped in wax paper and tied with a blue ribbon. On the top, in David's precise handwriting, for Melissa, if the house is ever threatened. My throat tightened as I untied the ribbon. Inside were neatly organized documents, deeds, notarized copies, and a letter addressed to me in David's hand. If you're reading this, it means someone has tried to take what doesn't belong to them. Remember what I told you. Control is about preparation, not force. Everything you need to protect Aaron, and our home is in motion already. Trust my friend, he knows what to do. At the bottom was a business card. Grant Sullivan, attorney at law, Arlington, Virginia. Aaron leaned over my shoulder. Who's that? Someone your father trusted. A man who doesn't take bribes and doesn't scare easily. I called the number right there in the bank's back office. He answered on the second ring. Grant Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, this is Melissa Green. My husband David left you an envelope. A pause. Melissa Green, yes. He told me to expect your call one day. There was no surprise in his tone, only quiet readiness. Then you understand the situation, I said. I do. Can you come to Arlington tomorrow morning? I can't leave my brother yet, I said, glancing at Aaron, but I can meet over video. Perfect. I'll prepare everything. When I hung up, Aaron was watching me with a mixture of disbelief and awe. Dad really planned all this? Yes, I said softly. Your father always saw storms coming long before the clouds appeared. We spent the afternoon at a diner across from the courthouse, eating pie we couldn't taste and pretending to be calm. Outside, the drizzle turned to mist. Mom, Aaron said suddenly, staring out the window. What if Aaron's trying to sell the place? Then he's going to discover that your father tied that land in knots no one can cut without my say-so. Aaron smiled faintly. That sounds like Dad. It does, I said, wrapping my hands around the coffee mug to hide the trembling. And tomorrow we'll finish what he started. By dawn, the fog had lifted, and with it, something inside me, the paralysis that comes before action. I sat at Calvin's kitchen table with my laptop, a cup of black coffee, and David's folder spread out like a battle map. Erin slept upstairs. She hadn't really rested in days. Grant Sullivan's video call came exactly at 8. His face filled the screen, mid-50s, composed, with the kind of stillness that comes from knowing how to read people before they speak. Mrs. Green, he said, voice low but steady. David prepared for this situation with remarkable foresight. I always suspected as much, I said. What did he tell you? that if anyone ever tried to transfer or claim ownership of the green property, I was to execute a contingency plan titled Asset Shield B. I reviewed the documents last night. He lifted a folder into view. Your husband created a layered trust years ago. The property isn't just in your name. It's nested under 3 protective entities. No one, not a spouse, not a creditor, not even the county clerk, can alter its title without your signature. For the first time in days, I felt the knot in my stomach loosen. So Aaron can't sell it? Not legally, but he can try, and I believe he already has. He slid a page closer to the camera, a scanned email thread, forwarded from his assistant. Someone using your son-in-law's name contacted a development firm out of Richmond, Pine Ridge Holdings. They specialize in rural acquisitions. The proposal mentions your address. I stared at the document, the words blurring for a moment. He's actually trying to sell my home. Not yours, Grant corrected gently. Our home. You're not alone in this, Mrs. Green. David made sure of that. When the call ended, I sat in silence, the quiet hum of the refrigerator filling the space between thoughts. Then I heard soft footsteps. Aaron, still in pajamas, hair tangled, eyes swollen from sleeplessness. Bad news, she asked. Predictable news, I said. Your husband's trying to sell the house to a developer. Her jaw tightened. That place is mine as much as his. No, I corrected. It's ours and it's protected, but we're going to make sure he learns exactly how protected. I drove into town that afternoon. The streets of Clearbrook always looked the same after rain. Shiny asphalt, puddles reflecting telephone wires, the smell of cedar from the lumber yard. On Main Street, I stopped by Carter's Copy and Notary, the little office where everyone in town got their paperwork certified. Mrs. Carter still wore her hair in the same tidy bun she'd had when I was in high school. Melissa Green, she said, squinting. Haven't seen you in ages. Had a quiet few years, I said, sliding papers across the counter. Need these notarized and sealed. She adjusted her glasses. Power of attorney, trust activation, title freeze order. Goodness, you're not playing around. Neither is he, I said. By the time I left, the stack of documents was thick enough to stop a bullet. That night, back at Calvin's, Aaron sat on the porch steps, watching the lights of the highway. Do you ever feel like Dad knew too much? She asked. He didn't know too much, I said. He just knew people. He knew what greed looked like when it was dressed up as charm. The phone buzzed on the railing, an unknown number. I didn't have to check to know who it was. Mom, Aaron said softly. It's him. Don't answer, I told her. Not yet. The message came through anyway. Aaron, we need to talk. Things have changed. You and your mother can't keep what's not yours. Aaron exhaled sharply. He really believes that. Of course he does, I said, taking the phone and setting it face down on the table. Men like Aaron mistake possession for ownership. That's why David's plan will hurt him most, because it takes both away. A county courier knocked at dusk and left a taped cardboard box on the porch, a return from the evidence check. Inside were Erin's clothes, a jumble of papers, her old laptop, and, wrapped in a hand towel, David's pocket watch. The machine was warm, its lid smudged, like someone had powered it on recently. Erin hugged the watch to her chest and set the laptop aside, face tightening. We'll deal with that tomorrow, I told her. Tonight, we lock every door and sleep. Inside, Calvin called for his evening meds, his voice raspy from the painkillers. I rose, tucking the sealed folder under my arm. I'm coming, I said, then quieter to myself. And so is the reckoning. The next morning, I woke before dawn, the world outside still wrapped in that gray half-light that makes everything look uncertain. Calvin was asleep in his chair, the TV still flickering softly. I pulled a blanket over him and slipped out the door, coffee thermos in hand, my thoughts sharper than they'd been in weeks. Grant called just after 7. "Melissa," he said, skipping the pleasantries, "I've contacted the county registrar. There's been an attempt to file a provisional transfer of title on your property, electronically, through a third-party platform. It was rejected because your digital signature was missing, but it tells us something important." "What's that?" I asked, though I already knew, "that your son-in-law is desperate, and desperate people make mistakes." I stared out at the field beyond Calvin's porch, the last of the morning mist burning off in the pale light. "So what's our move?" "I'm filing a motion to freeze all transactions related to your estate. We'll also have the county sheriff deliver a cease and desist notice to Pine Ridge Holdings." "Will that stop Aaron?" "It'll stop him legally," Grant said. "Emotionally, he'll probably double down. That's when we'll be ready." By noon, Sheriff Dean Holloway himself was sitting at my kitchen table. He was an old-school kind of man, slow voice, heavy boots, the kind who believed in listening before talking. "Melissa," he said, taking off his hat. Grant filled me in. "We've got a paperwork trail, clear as day. Your son-in-law filed documents he had no right to touch." "I assume that's a crime," I said. "It's more than one," he replied. "Fraud, attempted misrepresentation of ownership, maybe even forgery if we find evidence he tried to replicate your signature. I'll need to question him." "Do it by the book," I said. "No shortcuts. I don't want revenge, Sheriff. I want justice." He gave a small nod. "That's the best kind." Erin stood near the sink, arms crossed, watching every word. She'd barely spoken all morning, but now her voice cut through the quiet. "Can I be there when you talk to him?" Dean shook his head. "Better not. Let him underestimate what's coming. Men like that only learn the hard way." That evening I sat with Aaron on the back steps, the air cool and still. The farm stretched before us. Old pecan trees, the barn David rebuilt himself, the long drive leading to the main road. "He used to say the land holds memory," I said softly, "that if you listen, you can feel the weight of every choice ever made on it." Erin leaned her head on my shoulder. "I miss him." "I do too," I said, "but he's still here, in this dirt, in every damn legal clause he wrote to keep it safe." Her laugh was small but real. "That sounds exactly like him." "Yes," I said, smiling faintly, "and it's about to sound like us." The sheriff's call came the next morning. "He's been served," Dean said simply. "How'd he take it?" Let's just say he didn't appreciate the surprise. He's already contacted a lawyer out of Richmond. Name's Darren Mills. You'll probably hear from him soon. "Let him call," I said. "We're ready." When the call ended, Erin was standing behind me, already dressed, her hair pulled back, a calm fire in her eyes. "What do we do now?" she asked. "We wait," I said. "And while we wait, we keep building." By afternoon, I was on another video call with Grant. He looked almost pleased, the restrained satisfaction of a man whose opponent had just walked into his own trap. "Mills filed a complaint this morning," he said, "accusing you of withholding marital assets and using forged documentation to maintain control of the property." And they attached screenshots from Erin's old laptop as evidence. Erin froze beside me. "What? How would they?" "I expected this," I said quietly. "They must have copied the files before the county returned it in that box." Grant adjusted his glasses. "They think they've found something incriminating, but they don't realize your husband created those trust records 10 years before Erin's marriage. They've just presented proof that works against them." "So they gave us our own ammunition," Erin murmured. "Exactly," I said. "They think they're playing chess. They don't realize we built the board." That night, after Erin went upstairs, I sat by the window with David's letter on my lap. Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of wood smoke and the distant hum of trucks on the highway. I traced the familiar handwriting, his calm, measured strokes, and whispered, "It's working, David. Your plan is working." But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Men like Aaron don't surrender. They implode. And when they do, it's never quiet. The knock came just after sunset. I knew it was him before I opened the door. You can always feel the presence of someone who used to belong to your life, like a phantom limb you never asked to keep. Aaron stood on the porch, rain dripping from the brim of his jacket, eyes bright with that familiar mix of charm and arrogance. He looked thinner, more restless, but still carried himself like the world owed him an apology. "Melissa," he said, forcing a smile, "we need to talk." I didn't step aside. "About what?" He exhaled sharply, like a man performing patience. "About this mess. The sheriff, the lawyer, the paperwork. You didn't have to make this so ugly." Behind me, Aaron's voice came from the hallway. "It got ugly when you locked me out of my own house." He glanced past me, catching sight of her. "You could have called me back, Aaron. We could have figured things out quietly." "Quietly," she repeated. "You mean before you got caught?" Aaron's jaw tightened. "You're listening to your mother again. She's manipulating you." "Stop." My voice cut clean through the humid air. "You don't get to talk to her that way. You made your choices. Now you can live with them." He shifted, searching for the old ground he used to control. "You think that lawyer of yours can stop what's already in motion? The developers made a promise. There's real money on the line." I almost pitied him, almost. "You tried to sell something that was never yours," I said. "And now you're realizing David Green never played games he couldn't win." At the mention of my husband's name, Aaron's expression cracked. "You and your dead husband," he sneered. "He's been gone 5 years, Melissa. Let it go." I didn't flinch. "Oh, I let go, Aaron. Of a lot of things. But not the truth. And not this land." Behind him, headlights swept across the drive. Sheriff Dean Holloway's cruiser, followed by a second vehicle. Aaron turned, confusion flickering in his eyes as the sheriff stepped out, papers in hand. "Evenin', folks," Dean said evenly. "Mr. Keegan from the county office sent me to deliver these personally." Aaron's confidence drained as Dean handed him the envelope. Thick, stamped official. "What is this?" he demanded. "Notice of injunction," the sheriff replied. "Filed by the Green Trust. You're barred from any sale, contact with the developers, or entry onto the property without written consent." "That's insane." Aaron snapped. "You can't just—" Dean's voice stayed calm. "You can take it up with the judge in Fairview. Until then, the order stands." For a moment, no one spoke. The rain hit the porch roof like a metronome. Aaron stepped forward then. Not timidly, not angrily, just steady. "You always said power was about control," she told him. "Turns out you never had any." Aaron's eyes moved between us, from her to me, like he couldn't decide who'd betrayed him more. Then he laughed, short and bitter. "You think this is over? You don't know what I've got." I met his gaze. "You've got nothing left but the story you tell yourself to sleep at night." He took a step closer, but Dean was already between us, hand on his belt in silent warning. "That's enough," the sheriff said. "Time to go." Aaron hesitated, staring at me with a look that was half fury, half disbelief, as if he couldn't comprehend that the woman who once made him coffee and listened to his excuses had become the one ending his narrative. Then he turned, stomped down the steps, and climbed into his truck. The engine roared, tires spinning on gravel as he tore down the driveway into the night. Inside, Aaron sank onto the couch, shaking slightly. "I thought he'd hit you," she whispered. "He wouldn't," I said. "He doesn't know what to do with someone who's not afraid anymore." The sheriff lingered in the doorway. "You handled that better than most judges I've seen." "Thank you," I said, "but I think this was just the opening act." He tipped his hat. "Maybe. But you've got the law and half the county on your side. That's more than he ever will." After he left, the house felt heavy again. Quiet in that way only old homes can be. Aaron went upstairs to call Grant, and I stayed in the living room, the rain softening outside. On the mantel, next to the faded photo of David, lay the pocket watch Aaron had finally gotten back. I picked it up, thumb tracing the engraving. Time tells truth. For the first time since all this began, I smiled. The days that followed were strangely still, the kind of silence that comes not from peace but from exhaustion. For the first time in months, the house didn't feel like a battleground. The air was cool, the late autumn light spilling across the kitchen table where legal papers once covered every inch. Grant called that Monday. "Good news, Melissa," he said, and I could hear the quiet satisfaction in his voice. The judge reviewed the injunction and dismissed Aaron's complaint in full. The trust stands untouched. The property is officially secure. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just looked out the window at the stretch of land David had loved. The pecan trees, the barn, the weather-worn fence. All of it's ours. I finally asked. "All of it," Grant confirmed. "Aaron's lawyer withdrew from representation this morning. Seems your son-in-law ran out of both funds and friends." When the call ended, I stood there for a long moment, feeling the strange lightness that comes only when the storm finally breaks. Erin came down the stairs, still half asleep, her hair tied in a messy knot. I handed her the printed court order. She scanned it once, then looked up with a trembling smile. "So that's it." "That's it," I said. "He's finished." She let out a breath that sounded almost like a sob. "I didn't think we'd ever feel safe here again." "Safety isn't given," I said. "It's reclaimed." We spent that day reclaiming small things. I washed the last of the mud from the porch. Erin opened the curtains in her old room for the first time since the lockout. Even Calvin, still healing, shuffled outside to sit in the sun, muttering that the air finally smelled like home again. Late that afternoon, a silver sedan turned into the drive. For a heartbeat, my stomach tightened, but it wasn't Aaron. It was Sheriff Holloway. He stepped out slowly, hat in hand. "Didn't want to bother you," he said, "but thought you should know. Aaron left town last night. Sold his truck, emptied his storage unit. Word is he's headed west." I nodded. "Let him go." Dean gave me a small smile. "That's what I figured you'd say." He tipped his hat and left us standing in the quiet dust of our own peace. That evening, I sat on the porch with a glass of sweet tea. The sky bruised purple over the tree line. Erin joined me, barefoot, her face softer than it had been in months. "You know," she said, "Dad would have loved this moment." "He would have made a joke about the paperwork first," I said, smiling. She laughed. "Yeah, something like, 'A signature is mightier than the sword.'" We sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that felt earned. "Mom," she said quietly, "what happens now?" I looked out at the land, the porch light flickering against the dark. "Now we live," I said. "We take care of this place the way your father built it to last, and the way we proved it could survive." Erin reached over and took my hand. For the first time, her grip didn't feel like a daughter holding on for safety, but like a partner sharing strength. That night, after she went to bed, I took David's pocket watch from the mantel and wound it carefully. It ticked with a slow, steady rhythm, not loud but certain. On the back, the engraving caught the light. "Time tells truth." I whispered into the quiet room. It told ours. The wind rustled through the pecans outside, carrying the smell of wet leaves and cold soil, the scent of something ending and something beginning. For the first time in a long while, I felt free.